Okay, our participant list is expanding, growing rapidly, so we will just take another minute or so and let people stream in, and then we'll start. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Yorkville University Toronto Film School's Ask an Expert. I'm Dr. Deirdre Pickerel. I'm the Dean of Student Success for Yorkville University and Toronto Film School. And every Friday, we welcome an expert to the community to talk to all of you about a particular topic. Today's topic, I think, is very relevant and most interesting. So we're very grateful for our speaker and for all of you to be attending today. Please remember that we will accept questions through the Q&A forum. Please don't use the chat, but definitely use Q&A. There'll be as much opportunity for questions as we can manage in our 30 minutes. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn you over to the Director of Mental Health and Wellness, Shauna Thompson, who will introduce our speaker and host today's event. Shauna.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pickerel. So today we have with us Dr. Glenn B. Gelman. He brings more than 40 years of experience working in the helping profession, inclusive of 30 years as a doctoral level licensed clinical psychologist. During his extensive career, he has worked in clinical, medical, organizational, forensic, and academic areas of psychology. Dr. Gelman developed and directed several successful mental health practices and substance abuse programs. He is the author of several published articles and has been featured as a mental health expert to community groups, radio talk shows, and newspapers. As a practicing psychotherapist, Dr. Gelman provides direct mental health assessment and treatment services to adults, couples, children, and families. Since 1987, he has supervised, consulted with, and trained mental health, medical health, human service, and allied healthcare professionals, as well as master's and doctoral students. Since 1999, he has taught more than 5,000 students in in-seat, hybrid, web-enhanced, and online classrooms, and he currently provides instruction with us here as a professor with Yorkville's MACP program. I'm very pleased to welcome today Dr. Glenn Gelman.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can all see that okay. So my topic today is burnout in the COVID-19 world. And before I begin, I do want to thank Dr. Pickerel and Shauna Thompson and the staff at Yorkville University's Mental Health Counseling and Wellness Department. So just a quick overview of burnout. We all have myriad responsibilities at work and school. We care for our children, we care for our elders and loved ones. And during ordinary times, we seem to be able to multitask with grace, down moments notwithstanding. In extraordinary times, such as the one we're in now, everyday tasks can become much more stressful and overwhelming. And while we may continue to endure with our characteristic resolve, there is a kind of insidious drain that can deplete us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And when that happens, we are at risk for burnout and exacerbated even further by a crisis such as a pandemic. So my outline, just very briefly, will cover some of the current data about Canada in the COVID-19 era. We'll look at the difference between stress burnout and burnout on steroids, so to speak, with COVID-19. Look at some of the signs and symptoms, and then what to do to stop, prevent, and hopefully reverse burnout if you are on that path. So just very briefly, I won't go over all these statistics. You can read them as well. But just to note, this is data, these data come from the Canadian Mental Health Association as of June 2020. And you can see just the sheer impact of COVID-19 across both the general population and then identified populations as well. So not only are we at risk for burnout under ordinary and unusual circumstances, but in these extraordinary times, you can see the significant impact that COVID-19 is having. So just by way of definition, this is a broad and general definition, but you can see it's a progressive state affecting multiple life domains. Brought on by persistent and prolonged stress. Just to kind of give you a sense of some of the qualitative and quantitative distinctions between stress burnout and burnout with COVID-19, you can see again how under conditions of stress we may be charged, we may be overreactive, we may have a loss of energy and feel tired, we may feel anxious, mildly depressed. But we do push and we keep pushing. Under conditions of burnout, we may feel rejected and dejected. We may feel a loss of motivation, dispassionate. We may experience a mild or moderate depression, an apathy. Under conditions of burnout plus COVID-19, you can see how the impact is even more significant, again, both qualitatively and quantitatively. We feel empty and inactive. There's a loss of purpose, which is quite significant as a psychological risk. We may experience not just anguish, but an angst. It's a much more insidious and pervasive interior experience. We may experience moderate to severe depression. Instead of treading water under stress or drowning under burnout, we may feel drowned under the conditions of burnout and COVID-19. So let's look at, yes,
sorry to interrupt. We're just not able to see the slides changing along with your presentation.
All right, I'm not sure why. Does that help?
Yes, we can see that change now.
All right, I apologize. I'm not sure what. Okay, we move on to signs and symptoms. So this is not an exhaustive list, but a list to highlight some of the significant physical impacts of burnout and again, exacerbated by COVID-19. Such symptoms such as increased susceptibility to colds, sleep difficulties, changes in eating, a general malaise, just a kind of achiness and just a down, physically down, feeling as if in a fog. People with fibromyalgia often describe that experience in instances of burnout. People also will experience this kind of just this mental, physical, psychological fog. And then you can see as well other symptoms such as increased blood pressure, dizziness, headaches, muscle tension, an increased risk of accidents and injuries, and so on. Some of the behavioral signs include fighting with yourself to get out of bed in the morning, hiding under the covers, not wanting to get up, procrastinating, knowing that doing so will only make your tasks harder to complete, avoidant escapist behavior, which leaves you feeling hollow really after hours and hours of distracted time, diminished effectiveness with activities of daily living, crying for no apparent reason, high risk of regressive behavior, an increased kind of an intolerance toward yourself and others, and even a kind of mean-spiritedness or selfish behavior toward others, which is uncharacteristic of you. And then at worst, behaviors that are considered to be self-harming. Some of the cognitive signs and symptoms include problems with attention and sustaining concentration, executive function difficulties such as indecision, inflexible thinking, difficulty with planning and sequencing, simulating different options for solutions, zoning out when someone else is talking, not just your partner, confusion, forgetfulness, a kind of difficulty expressing yourself or filtering your comments, and difficulty problem solving, and a kind of excessive engaging in daydreaming and fantasizing. I mean, some of that is certainly normal and normative, but excessive to the expense of getting things done. Some of the significant emotional signs and symptoms include feeling just drained, a loss of confidence, feeling disillusioned, feelings of rage, and outrage and enrage, cynicism and negativity, feeling unappreciated no matter how much you do for others, a kind of a can't snap out of it depression, multiple experiences of anxiousness, tension, nervousness, irritability, just a loss of pleasure and a lack of joy, feeling resentful and then feeling guilty and ashamed of feeling resentful, feeling apathetic and indifferent, and so on. Some of the social and relational signs from the social side: relational conflicts with others, and intolerance for the shortcomings of others, complaining about others, withdrawing from ordinary activities, partying on the weeknights, leaving you with a kind of emotional hangover the morning after, feeling contempt toward others. On the relational side, volatile arguments without resolution, yelling and screaming at your kids, flying off the handle, capital I intimacy and small I intimacy problems, blaming and being hypercritical, and keeping secrets. Some of the work-related signs and symptoms: being tardy, not really caring, taking days off because you can't get going, feeling overwhelmed, unable to focus on important tasks, playing online games that avoid school-related tasks, just a little sense of joy in the job or the work that you're doing that ordinarily you might find much more gratifying. Fighting through your own resistance, working harder but having less to show for it, worrying you'll be fired but kind of secretly hoping so. And perhaps the most pervasive effects of burnout and burnout with COVID-19 are to your spirit and your soul: a broken spirit, a loss of sympathy and empathy, loss of meaning, purpose, and value, a loss of hope, and even far more seriously, a wish not to be here, or even thoughts of suicide. Okay, so what to do about all of this? So here are 50 steps to take. This is certainly not exhaustive, and I hope these suggestions are really heuristic. I invite you to be creative and contemplate your own steps forward out of feelings or any path toward burnout or burnout exacerbated by COVID-19. The first one, most importantly, is that if someone is suicidal or expresses thoughts of suicide, seek help immediately. The others on this page are fairly obvious, which is why we probably need to be reminded of them: to eat and sleep healthy, to exercise every day, even if it's for 2 minutes, not to misuse prescribed medication, avoid use of nicotine or inhalants that can affect pulmonary function or cardiovascular functioning, avoid use of or excessive use of other kinds of substances. And while I know this is very hard to do, take a day off of all electronics. It's really quite refreshing and resetting. Another step would be to sit in your car or somewhere else where no one can hear you and scream. And I would encourage you to complain at least once a day, but to limit the time you do so to 5 or 10 minutes. With regard to cognitive and emotional resiliencies, I would encourage you to find a cause to fight for, not against. And this is an important distinction. When you fight for something, you are more likely to be passionate, living in accordance with your values, energized. When you're fighting against, you're motivated not by passion and values, but more by anger and rage. The next one may seem a little corny, but Erich Fromm reminds us that it is as important to love another as it is to feel loved, maybe more so. Next is to learn from the wisdom of elders and the innocence of our children. Another step would be to honor your culture and then take this time as an opportunity to learn about and honor what other cultures do. Commune with nature, do something creative and artistic, even if you're not good at it, like me. Practice meditation and mindfulness, and if you can, again, even if it's for 2 minutes at a time, try to do this in the morning, midday, and at night if possible. Plan laughter parties. Some of you may be familiar with Norman Cousins' work, Anatomy of an Illness. If not, the idea of planning parties, even online, in which people tell jokes or express joy or what they're grateful for, or book reading parties, anything that promotes good cheer. And of course, if necessary, seek counseling and therapy. From a social and relational perspective, encourage you to connect with others. We see lots of people texting every day, and from my perspective, people seem to be in contact with each other all the time, but not connected. I encourage everyone to break bread together online if necessary. The news is significant. We hear the news constantly and incessantly, sometimes before it even happens. And so I would encourage you to watch the news no more than twice a day, otherwise turn it off. Listen to all kinds of music, mix it up every day. You can probably skip disco music though. Read a hard copy book. There's nothing like actually turning pages rather than reading on a Kindle or a Chromebook or a computer. Dance and sing with others, even if you can't dance and sing like me. I also encourage you to avoid negative people, even if that means offending somebody. Again, laugh, watch a funny show, have your family tell jokes, and have a family fun night. Get your hands dirty, work in the garden, form a drumming circle, or other kinds of cultural activities that connect people. Studying remotely, I would encourage you to start each day as you have done so previously, dressed like you're going to work or school. I know some people say you don't have to, and if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But there is something to be said for dressing up and as if you are going to work or school. Set up a workspace at home, no matter how small it is, with accoutrements such as a picture of your family, a small plant, a piece of paper and pencil, other kinds of things that you would ordinarily have at a work desk or a workstation. And then after your day is done, reclaim that workspace, take it all down and restore it as your home. Step away from your workstation for breaks and lunch. And you can see the rest of these. I strongly encourage you to set a start time to begin looking at emails and a stop time to look and respond to emails. Finally, I would encourage you to begin each day with a declaration of your values, proclaim them, declare them, practice one virtue each day. Today I'll show compassion, tomorrow I'll practice integrity, the next day courage, another day humility. Engage in Gemeinschaft Gefühl, which is Adler's notion of social interest. Do one good deed every day. Pray even if you're not religious. There's plenty of literature that supports the idea that praying even to a higher purpose or for a higher purpose is quite healing and redemptive. Live life each day with intention. grieve any losses you are experiencing, nurture something that is alive, embrace the wisdom of ambiguity. Viktor Frankl said people who survive have a tolerance for ambiguity, embrace insecurity. Alan Watts wrote a book, The Wisdom of Insecurity. Dream of the future, and end each day with a reflection of appreciation and gratitude. And then finally, if nothing else, we are in an era where we must endure, tolerate, cope, struggle, carry on, and hold on. Okay, here are some resources. The two I'll just draw your attention to in particular. One is the Toronto Film School, and the other is the Yorkville University Mental Health Counseling and Wellness Department. All right.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gelman. There were some questions that came in about going through the signs. So what if someone is experiencing more of the emotional, not so much of the cognitive? Is this all still normal?
So, burnout affects every one of us differently, and often affects the elements of our nature that we prevail upon most to live our lives. So if you are, in a sense, more emotionally driven than cognitively driven, you may find burnout affecting you more emotionally than cognitively, and so on.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, please place your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Okay. So the next question is, why isn't it good to watch the news more than twice? So this person is asking, what is the impact of watching the news?
So the impact is that, and I'll just say parenthetically, it doesn't matter which news station you listen to. In the last couple of years, I've actually had to hospitalize several of my clients who found themselves almost addicted to the news, just watching and checking their phones and watching television and listening to the radio. And it's just it's a beating down, a beating up and a beating down, negativity after negativity. And it just wears on people. And I've since seen others really drawn down, perhaps not to the point of requiring hospitalization, but really developing just such a negativity and a cynicism about the world.
Okay. Excuse me. What advice would you give to someone who needs help dealing with loss or death?
Well, first would be to not let anyone tell you how to grieve. And if anyone tells you to get over it, you can thank them for their kind wishes and ignore that. I think, we all grieve in our own unique ways. Some of us defer grieving. Some of us delay grieving in the service of supporting others who are more grieving more overtly. But each of us needs time to grieve in whatever special way is healing for us. And in my experience in working with terminally ill people and their families, one of the most healing ways with regard to grieving a loss is to find a way to honor the person or the animal that you have lost. I'm afraid that's a question I'm afraid might not do full justice to in a short amount of time.
Someone is asking if you could put up the resource slide once again, But just as a reminder, we are currently live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be found there on Yorkville's site as well.
Okay, happy to do so. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the next question is, how do you deal with a work environment or coworkers that are also struggling and create more of a negative workspace? Are there any tips that you would suggest for this?
Well, if you have to work with them, then there are several ideas in the from the IO world, the industrial organizational world, or vocational psychology. One is to create structured but very limited amounts of time when coworkers can get together and, in a sense, have a gripe session or to complain. It's a way of in a sense, acknowledging that people have complaints, may have a right to complain, but that it can also be limited and structured within the context of a workday. Another idea is to effectively, politely and constructively and respectfully confront that person with the truth. In the sense that the truth may hurt, but it can also help. Avoiding people who you have to deal with without engaging them enables them to continue, as they have no external structure to tell them that what they're doing is not okay or is affecting others negatively.
So there are some questions here about the signs and symptoms that you went through earlier. And there was a mention that some of these symptoms seem to align with other psychological disorders.
Yes.
And so they're wondering how best to differentiate between burnout and some other psychological concern.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the literature is actually, in my experience, is actually suggestive of the idea that there is not a very clear distinction between the symptoms of burnout and the symptoms of what we might refer to as diagnosable mental disorders, such as anxiety or depression. To some extent, it's a matter of degree. People who are experiencing burnout will often be diagnosably depressed in a mild to moderate sense, or may have a diagnosable generalized anxiety disorder. People who are even more at risk during COVID-19 may have more severe manifestations of those circumstances. But there's no question that people with pre-existing mental illness are their illnesses or their disorders and their symptoms are significantly exacerbated. People with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder are experiencing significant problems in this era, far more severe than under ordinary circumstances.
Okay. And so, of course, we know that back to school time is approaching. So what are some strategies or suggestions that you would have specifically for teenagers going back to school, coping with burnout?
Well, it's interesting. I've consulted with a number of schools in my corner of the world, and there are two mindsets. One is to kind of impose rules and restrictions on teenagers, which in my experience only invites them to resist in self-defense. And alternatively, we should give most teenagers the benefit of the doubt and realize that they actually have minds and can think for themselves. That's both the blessing and the curse of good parenting as we raise our children to have minds of their own. And in that regard, we want to help them to be informed of what's going on and to empower them with responsibility rather than imposing that, to empower them to make responsible choices on their own, to give them guidelines and structure and choices.
Thank you. And now there are a couple of questions about singles. So for people who are living alone, who've been in isolation during the pandemic without really a support system or family living close by, what suggestions would you have for someone in terms of getting that social interaction and coping with stress and burnout during this time?
Again, an excellent question. Because loneliness, we hear that hypertension is the silent killer in the medical world, but loneliness is the silent killer in the psychological world. And so, if we cannot, so first, if we are able to connect with our neighbors, even at a distance, even in an apartment building, it's essential to have that kind of face-to-face contact. Secondly, would be to the extent that it's safe to leave your apartment and to frequent social places where you can potentially interact and mingle. If you are sheltered in place and you're not able to do that, then it's absolutely essential to interact, to find online sources of interacting with people, even strangers, but of course in a safe forum, safe and healthy forum, and there are plenty of them.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gelman, for this wonderful presentation and for all of those helpful tips that you've shared. And thank you to all the participants for your questions. And once again, just a reminder that this is being streamed live on YouTube, and you can go to Yorkville's page to be able to view this recording. Also, I would like to invite everyone to join us again next week at the same time for our next Ask an Expert session, because on the side of burnout and stress is what we were talking about today. And next week, we're continuing in terms of adjusting to the new normal. So what is really the next step? So once again, I'd like to thank Dr. Gelman so much for being with us today. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend and see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.